Okay, without further ado, let's introduce Yannick. So today we have Yannick Jacob. Yannick, thank you so much for being with us. What
My pleasure.
Honor and privilege to have you. So Yannick and I have got a connection in common, which is the school that I studied at for my coaching qualification, which is the school called Animas Centre for Coaching. And Yannick is someone that I've wanted to have on these webinars for quite a long time, a very, very interesting and very well educated and very well experienced coach. So Yannick is an existential life and leadership coach. That's a mouthful. I'll let you explain what that is in a second. Positive psychologist, coach, trainer and supervisor, and a mediator and a program director of the accredited certificate in integrative coaching at the School of Positive Transformation. So all of those are big long words. Yannick, do you want to summarize for us who it is, what it is you do?
Oh, I'd be here for a while. First of all, thank you. It's fantastic to talk to you, particularly about this, because I find it deeply meaningful, and I'll say a few more words. But yeah, I have a bit of a portfolio career. I generally like to help people think and navigate things, figure things out. Big questions excite me around happiness, around why am I here and what's the point and how can I make the most of this? And in that, my work led me through many corners. And my main focus is on coaching, and I'm happy to tell you a bit more. I just like having conversations because I think that's how we grow, through conversing, through relationships, through thinking about stuff deeply.
Yes, deeply. Yes, thank you. So that's a perfect frame for this conversation. And the reason that you got so many emails from us encouraging you to actually be here live is that we really want you to have a conversation with us. So Heather, I must introduce the team. So we've got Heather and Jay, who are part of the Luminary Mindset team. They are the reason we're all here today. They do everything. All Yannick and I do really is show up and talk. So thank you. So Heather's going to monitor the raised hands. What's it called? It's a reaction, isn't it? Or I don't know, a reaction. So if you raise your virtual hand, Heather will see that, she'll unmute you, and then please join in the conversation. Thanks, Matthew, for acknowledging that. So we really want to hear your views rather than it being Yannick and I talking at you. If we say something where you've got a question or you've got an example that you want to bring to life with us, please do. Okay, are there any questions thus far? No raised hands? Let's keep going. I'm just going to keep going until Heather interrupts me. All right. Thanks, everybody. So this is the format of today. So this is what we're actually going to take you through. What is meaning? Now, you've heard me talk about meaning before in our Luminary mindset context, which is the meaning that we make up inside our heads around events that are happening around us. That's not the meaning that we're going to be talking about today. So there's a different meaning to meaning being presented to you today, which is going to be really interesting. So we'll go through that initially with Yannick, and then we're going to talk about how to measure meaning. Now, one of the things that I love doing with the corporates that I work with and the leaders that I work with is talking to them about how do you measure the intangible? So behavior, belief systems, values, meaning, purpose. How do you measure relationships, connection? So we're going to talk about some of the tools that Yannick's brought to Luminary Mindset to measure meaning. And then we're going to talk about meaning in relationships, and there's time for questions and follow up at the end. So that's the agenda. And because we've got so much to talk about, I'm just going to get stuck straight in, if that's all right with you, Yannick.
Yeah.
Right. People want to explore how their existence is worthy and valuable. So when we first started talking about meaning and we were discovering our different contexts around what meaning is and what I believe it is and what you believe it is, for me, a lot of the work that I do when we're talking about meaning in an organization is people's work actually being valued and leaders acknowledging the value in that work and verbalizing through word, spoken word, through written word, but then also the symbols and signs within the organization that say, yes, you are valuable, you are worthy to us. We really want to have you around is how I interpreted it. But I really want you to share with us what your interpretation of meaning is.
Yeah, here we are right in the meaning and purpose, or meaning versus purpose conversation, right? Because a lot of what I find in organizations, what makes that kind of worth, that value, that meaning, tends to be purpose. What are we here to do? What is this organization doing? Or, what is this person supposed to do? There's a purpose to somebody's role description, somebody's job. It's supposed to be doing something. And if they get that done, then the purpose was fulfilled. So the purpose doesn't necessarily have to be meaningful to the person that fulfills that purpose. You can put somebody into a position where they just get their job done successfully. And then that's maybe meaningful to the organization, but maybe not so meaningful to the person who's doing the job. So the most powerful purpose is the one that actually feels meaningful. It's an experience. It's a felt emotion. It's like I feel that this means something to me, and it's very subjective. So very different things can be meaningful to very different people. But that kind of meaning towards the future, that doing something meaningful with a purpose, towards the future, towards creating something that aligns with what's important to me, with what feels right. That's the kind of purpose that we are striving for. And I think too many people these days, I heard the term purpose game the other day. That was wonderful. Just like, oh, well, we say it's important and that's why it's important. And so let's figure out intellectually what the purpose is and what the why is and what's meaningful. And then we write what's meaningful on that section on our website and people can align with that. And it just doesn't quite work that way. It has to be lived. It has to be embodied. Otherwise, you lose a lot of the power of meaning and purpose.
Yes.
So those conversations are the most interesting to me because people really connect with something that matters. And if they do that, once they connect, once they have that embodied experience of this is meaningful to me, I chose it to be meaningful, or, this is it. Then you get all the benefits and people take less sick leave and people work harder and they work better and they have a better culture. There's a better atmosphere, they connect more with other people. Leaders get the buy-in from people who align with that kind of purpose, because it's felt, and we're emotional beings, so we connect on that level most strongest.
Yeah, couldn't agree more. And this links to everything that we're doing at Luminary Mindset around emotional intelligence. And why, when I work with leaders and they say, why is emotional intelligence so important? I say, because that's what we are. Like, aside from the cognitive, the miracle is our brain and our cognition and our intellect and our IQ. But really what has people give themselves over or hand themselves over to an organization or to a task or to a project or to an outcome is that emotional connection, isn't it? They've got to want to get out of bed, leave everything else in their life behind, and focus their entire energy and being on that work purpose, which some people do under duress. So one of the things that I talk about with my leaders is, you can do it through force, you can do it through, trying to incentivize people with money or with things that are tapping into their kind of what I call lower energy, that survival instinct. I need to do this to survive. I can't lose my job, otherwise I'll lose my home, or, that fear factor. But you get like that much, you get the job done, but people burn out, people leave, people are dissatisfied. There's, it's not that energy that you just described, which is when people are really inspired to connect into something.
Yeah.
They just want to do it, right?
Yeah. And we need both, right? We need the cognitive and we need the emotional. Yes. I think the emotional often sits at the base level, it sits at the foundation. That's what usually we react to first. But we are an amazing species that has learned to transcend certain emotions. Yes. We can actually block our emotions quite well to get the job done. Yes. So the cognitive power is not to be underestimated, and it's very, very important. And this is where the kind of the double meaning of meaning kind of points to as well, both in German and in English. I'm German originally, so the word Sinn, it points both to our senses, right? We can perceive something, and we make sense of things, and that's an intellectual one.
Yes.
So I find that super interesting that even the word points to both.
Yes, and the meaning making, where we're making sense of things, is the meaning making that we talk about at Luminary Mindset. It's that judging, it's that perceiving, it's that, okay, we're all receiving the same information right now. We've got 26 people on here, all listening to you and I speak the same words, and there'll be 26 different versions of this webinar being processed right now, which I just think is brilliant. And in an organization, when you're trying to shift culture or performance, and you've got thousands of meaning-making machines all judging and perceiving their environment in a very individualistic way, how do you, so we're going to get onto that. That's fascinating. So that really frames what is meaning. Thank you. So we put some words on here, and I hope the audience, I hope you're hearing what we're saying, and maybe it's coming to life for you a little bit, what meaning means for you. But we've given words like relevance. Is the work relevant? Is it in line with your overall purpose? Does it create connection? So that emotive connection that Yannick was talking about, can you identify with it? Is it part of your idealization? Is it all made up? Is the one that I added, because I thought, well, at the end of the day, what meaning is, to each of us is effectively made up by our values, our beliefs. Yeah,
but then we have all of these structures that offer meaning, right? From the moment that we are born, our parents help us make sense of things, or our primary caregivers. There's so many narratives in the world that provide meaning structures and maps of meaning for us.
Yes.
So I think that's why those kind of conversations to figure out what my meaning is actually are so important. And that's why they can be so complex, because there's all of these narratives of other people telling us what's supposed to be meaningful. And some of that we connect and resonate with, and some of that we may be used to and not so much anymore. Maybe we've taken a job and we were aligned with that, and then we changed as people and our meaning structures changed. And people hold on to things once they've built, but so that's why it's difficult when somebody goes through a change in their personal life, or, a transformation as a person, or maybe they've just aged for 20 years and some things just change. And then all of a sudden they find themselves renegotiating and re-exploring what is still meaningful and what is just a narrative that doesn't connect emotionally anymore. And it's also worth mentioning that meaning hasn't really gotten a lot of attention I'm coming from a research perspective into this. I then started practicing, but meaning hasn't been researched much. We've talked about meaning for thousands of years. There's mentions thousands of years back to figure out what this is, not just what is the meaning of life, but like, what does meaning mean? And in the last 10, 15 years, a lot of research has been published. It's difficult to keep up now, but it used to not have a lot of attention. So this is where the models have come from around understanding meaning and the different levels of meaning. And it's fascinatingly under-researched. So, but there is a growing evidence base, and I think it's important to mention where we're speaking from.
Yes, absolutely. And how does this link to positive psychology?
So meaning is positive psychology is a science of what's right with people, right? We're looking at what can go right, what are the resources we can build on, what builds a good life, what builds happiness and well-being, psychological well-being, satisfaction with work and life, positive emotions, how can we build on strengths? And meaning is connected in several ways. First of all, it's a key pillar to happiness and well-being. Having a sense of meaning in your life. It's not very well defined within the well-being theories, but within the research, if we have a sense of purpose going forward, or if we feel that our life is meaningful now, if we just sense that, even if it's very subjectively, it's a huge mediator to how well somebody feels in life overall. It's a mediator to happiness and psychological well-being. So it matters. People who are in the lowest percentage of meaning, of I have meaning in my life, in surveys, they're most likely to kill themselves, for example. It's a suicide preventer. If we feel that our work is meaningful, our life is meaningful, it just gives us a base level that makes us keep going. It's such an important one. And then it's connected to strength. A lot of positive psychology, particularly in the workplace, is utilizing the power of character strengths. And when we do something we're naturally good at, something that resonates with us, something that is us, it cannot be not meaningful, right? When we feel we're doing something that we're supposed to do, and whether you believe in some sort of higher power or not, if you're using your character strengths, if you're using what you're naturally good at, it just connects so strongly. It feels so authentic. It's difficult not to connect with the sense of, oh, this is me. This is what I do. And that's just a wonderful feeling, and it's impossible not to feel meaningful when we're like that. And we tend to perform at our best when we do that.
Absolutely. And it's so relevant to not just coaching, but also organizational culture as well, because a lot of people that I work with, I say to them, your HR department and your HR processes focus on what's wrong with people, what their development areas are, where the deficit is, which is very demotivating. You get to the year end, you've busted your gut potentially all year to deliver on your purpose, and you've been trying to make it all meaningful for yourself, and then you get told, okay, well, this was good, but let's work on this. Like, let's just keep the carrot kind of on the stick. Whereas organizations that I convinced to switch that on its head and focus on what people are doing well and align people to their strengths rather than aligning people to a job description or to a task, they get so much more out of their people. They get so much more. There's so much more engagement. There's so much more enthusiasm. and you break down those barriers between roles, you know, like, well, that's my role and that's your role. Well, actually, that's my strength can help you with your role. Like, how about we just work together? It's so powerful. I love what you just said.
Oh, absolutely. In my ideal world, everybody gets hired for strengths.
Yeah.
Not only strengths, but like skills can be learned generally.
Yeah.
Strength, and at the core of strengths, character strengths, there sits values and virtues.
Yes.
And that's who that person is. And if you figure out who they are and then you hire the people to fit the job, you know, then you have everything gets better.
Yes.
You know, including the bottom line.
Absolutely. Does anybody, so thank you. So I'm just going to take a pause, because I did say I would love conversation. I'm just wondering if anybody's got a kind of a curious question or anything to contribute, or please raise your hand. Otherwise it is 50 minutes of me and Yannick having a great conversation, which might also be what people want as well. So I don't want to force the issue, but if there is anything that anybody would like to contribute, please do raise your hand at any point and we will bring you in.
I'm down for a conversation. I'm super interested in what people are thinking as well.
Me
because
too.
Really all of this theory needs to be applied. And I have a tendency to be a big picture thinker, but in conversations, the stuff comes out that how do I actually do this in my organization? How do I actually do this with my team? How can this make a difference in my workplace? That's the questions I think that matter a lot more than what is the meaning of meaning and what are different categories and different levels.
Yeah. And also,
hey, hey Yannick.
Oh, hey Matthew.
Zoe.
Hey Matthew.
Hello. So I work for an organization, but I'm a coach as well. And my full-time job, my 9 to 5, is working in the organization. And I'm on a mission to do what you guys are talking to now, which is to reverse the culture and look at what our strengths and whatnot. There's one branch, particularly our Melbourne branch, that is struggling at the moment with culture. Sales reps in particularly. We've just gone through sales rep after sales rep, and we've got another one on board who's underperforming. And I've reached out to have a meaningful conversation with him, not about the performance, but about what's going on, you know. And he hasn't really taken to that. There's a sales rep in Sydney that I had a meaningful conversation with last month, and then in the month of September, sorry, in August, in the month of September, he had a cracking month, one of his best ever. And so I can see that the meaningful conversations, they do work, but
yes,
I'm kind of stumped. I really want to grab this guy and just say, mate, sit down and let's talk. But if he's not open to it, he's not open to it, right? What's it been like in your experience?
Yeah, if they're not open to have the conversation, how do we reach them? You know, because that's the cornerstone, that's the door in. If somebody's not open to get a bit more personal, you know, to open up a little bit about, because we're talking about something that's personal. I think there's a lot of people who have this, I go to work and then I'm my work persona, and I don't really want people here to know me. Because if they knew me, then they can attack me on some level. And I think that's a fear that sits somewhere in us. So the art is to create that relationship, make people feel safe enough so that they show you who they are. Because that's what they need to do when we want to align personal meaning with the organizational meaning structures. That's when but what if somebody get hired and they don't really agree with the organizational values? They're not really aligned. They're just there to do a job and they don't want to lose that job. Fair play. But then they might not be so open to it. So what we need to do is figure out, you know, through any sort of information that we might have. And it can be the smallest thing. It could be somebody likes the same football team, you know, or the same sport. And you just kind of, you know, you overhear that they're going to see the game later, whatever. These are little meaningful moments that we can connect with people. Find an entrance somewhere to get to know this person. But, you know, ethically, they need to sign up. They need to say, I want to have this conversation. And if they don't want to have a conversation and show who they are and, you know, figure out how I can make this more meaningful, it's really difficult to do it.
Yeah, I hear what you're saying. Yeah.
Thanks, Matthew.
Absolutely.
Tahir, did you have a comment? Thanks, Matthew. That was really awesome question. I'd like Tahir wanting to respond as well. Go for it, Tahir.
Yeah, thanks, Yannick. Thanks, Zoe. It's such a rich and wide subject. and something I kind of hear, because I go in as a finance director, CFO, and to try and work with finance teams, and especially younger, maybe underperforming controllers, directors, and so forth, and try and get them to lift their game. They sometimes say, well, we hear these messages and we try and understand the meaning and how we're meant to change and reflect and all of those sorts of things. But sometimes what I hear from them is they don't always respect the root or the person these messages are coming from. And that's a real blocker. And I don't know if you talk a little bit more about that, that'd be really good.
Yeah, I can say a few things now. You touch on a super important point, two actually. One is that the younger generations generally care a lot more about meaning. And you might have heard all the stuff about the millennials. I'm a late millennial still. The next generation even more so. They crave meaning. And a lot of times there's been a few surveys that the younger generations choose a job that's meaningful over a job that pays better. So that's, I think, extremely significant that people would accept a pay cut to have more meaningful work. That tells me that we need to do the work there. But yes, when they don't feel like the message is genuine from upstairs, then it's difficult to connect with that. And this is why I think the meaning game I mentioned, if we're gaming purpose, it's a dangerous game, because if it comes across as inauthentic, you might lose that person. Yeah. And you might not get that conversation anymore because the trust is broken. And it can be really difficult when the culture is one where the workers don't trust the leadership. It's a really difficult situation to be. Showing up authentic includes showing up vulnerable, because as soon as you show what you really care about, people can find a way in. But it also is the only way that that person that doesn't really connect with that starts connecting with you. If you show up consistently and you show up authentically, consistently, and you show, not just say that you care about meaning and purpose and that you want to make a difference, but that is being felt in some way. And that's not going to be a job description. If you have somebody in a decision-making position that has a few people reporting in and they're key person to get on board, and you tell them, look, you have to be creating more meaning, and that person does the job, it's probably not going to do what you would like it to do. The person needs to be on board, and the person needs to be connecting with what they're tasked with. Otherwise, it's just talk.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Great question. That leads us out. You'll notice I've stopped sharing screen because that was a conversation. I just wanted to be in the conversation rather than have a big slide on the screen. I'll go back to our presentation when we need to. But that really leads us on to, Yannick, that whole top-down, bottom-up approach, doesn't it? And we're talking about leaders being vulnerable and leaders emulating the kind of the behavior. But at the same time, individuals need to be up for this, don't they? How do we approach that top-down, bottom-up? Who goes first is my question. Who goes first?
Yeah, it depends, right? Ideally, it's a combination. And when we talk about bottom up and top down, there's generally two pathways to create more meaningful work. One is to work with the people who are in leadership positions, who can create fertile ground for meaningful work. Somebody who can create the conditions so that somebody can connect with that kind of meaning. That includes, on a practical level, doing the work around what are our values and how do they show up. That includes the work of showing up authentically, what we just talked about. It can create creating space for your staff to connect to each other. Days where they can actually see each other or connect with each other in some other way. Out days, whatever, parties, even a Christmas party. If it's well done, it can really help create more meaningful work, because people create relationships with each other, and then the workplace becomes something else, something other than just doing a job. So that's top down, and we often need decision makers on board to make an organization-wide difference. That's one of the most effective ways to do it. But you can lead a horse to water, but you can't make it drink. Just because you create the meaningful conditions for meaningful work doesn't necessarily mean people are taking it up. Yeah. And that can be really frustrating for leaders in any field, when you put hard work in and your staff just doesn't really seem interested. They're just there to do the job.
Yeah.
So bottom up, even if leadership isn't on board. I've done a lot of coaching work with people in organizations who say, well, my leaders just don't care about me experiencing work as meaningful. They just need me to get the job done, and that's what I'm being paid for. They're just not on board with all of this positive psychology woo-woo meaning stuff. And you can create a lot of meaning personally. And we can show you 2 models, which we're going to do later anyway. But that's bottom up. We can create meaning, and sometimes that takes on. Sometimes the people who work for the company, they just decide work to be more meaningful, or they have the conversations of how what they care about personally actually shows up in work. They make the connections, or they decide to use their strength more in a different way at work, and then they feel work is more meaningful, not because of something that has been done for them, but because of something that they have done.
It's really interesting. I've discovered this when I used to recruit, when I was director of internal audit and risk. Recruiting was a really fascinating process for me, because I wanted to understand why people got into the vocation or the profession that they were in. Because for me, there was a link. I could see a link between why they were doing it, why they got into it in the first place, and their connection to it, whether it was meaningful or not, whether it was like something that they felt passionate about and that's why they went into it, or whether it was something more transactional, less about meaning and more about circumstances, that he was going to provide them with something. I say it transactional, I mean, transactional being less connected to emotion and more about practicalities. And you can see that when you're interviewing people, can't you? And there's no right or wrong. It's not that we want all of our team filled with people who are really connected and they've got meaning coming out of their pores, but it's an interesting way to understand what's going to motivate somebody.
Yeah, and I wish we would change the recruiting game more into that direction, because when you choose your recruiters, I think you can choose recruiters who recruit for meaning and strength. Who choose somebody, because I had this idea of recruiting as well. I thought it was going to be so psychologically interesting, matching the right person with a job description. And then what I've heard from recruiters was, oh no, we just make 1,000 calls and then 100 people are interested and 10 are going to buy in. So, then I get my commission. And I'm like, oh, that has nothing to do with psychology at all.
No.
And I'm obviously very much simplifying it. But if you do, you've got a chance, right? When you try to fill a job role, hire the recruiters and create a process where you can check in, where you can make it more likely that somebody's going to open up. I've been in a lot of really bad interviews where people are just not interested in me as a person. So I just told them what they wanted to hear. And I've been interviewing people where I felt they're just trying to tell me what I want to hear to get the job. So creating a process where we can create a connection, where they feel, oh, this person seems to be on board with what I care about, and they only want to hire people who care about this, and they can pick up whether somebody cares about something or just pretends to.
Yes.
I think it's a crucial part in the process of creating a culture is to hire the right people. And that starts with having that conversation.
Yes.
And can be difficult when you have, too many applicants. But I think it's worth it, because you're going to, in the end, you're going to save a lot of money hiring the right people.
Yes. And this links to the link that my brain's just made there is it links back to identity. And I don't mean individual identity, I mean organizational identity. If you've got a really, really strong sense of identity as an organization, you know exactly what you're looking for. You know what fits, what doesn't fit, and then you can design the recruiting process around that. If you don't have a strong sense of identity, it's very easy to just create kind of a melting pot of different, and diversity is great. I mean, that doesn't go against the need for diversity. It's just finding the right people who are going to meaningfully connect to the purpose and the vision and the objectives of the organization and what the organization's up to.
And the challenge is that if you already have an organization and you're getting into this now and you want to make a change in the organization, but you don't want to fire 60% of your people because they don't really see them aligned, what do you do? And I know some entrepreneurs who just did that. They're just huge reconstruction of the whole thing based on meaning. And there's whole consultancies who focus on putting meaning at the top of your organization. The whole Simon Sinek Start With Why movement is basically talking about meaning and purpose in that way. But what do you do if you don't want to completely change your organization from the bottom up? And that starts with those kind of conversations. You can invite people to come on board with this. But how that works, it depends. It's a context. It's on a case-by-case basis. There's no blanket statements that we can make other than what we know from the data.
Absolutely. One of the methods that one of my clients is introducing to try and, because they don't want to just they can't. I mean, it's quite risky getting rid of a lot of people, especially when you've got subject matter expertise, and it's not culturally, it's not a great strategy. They've started incorporating meaning and behavioral observations into their performance management system. So instead of their performance management system just being KPI, like the outputs of what people are doing, the results, it's actually how people are doing it or why people are doing what they're doing is part of the measurement of how people are performing and whether people are aligned with the overall vision and purpose of the organization, which is really interesting because that what that creates, which they don't like, but they're doing it anyway, is it creates the need for more conversations, because you can't just pull a report and look at whether people are performing or not. You actually have to sit down with your team and talk to them about what that behavior means to them, what it would look like, what they're going to be doing and saying when they are being that way. And it requires a much more conversational style of leadership, which is more coaching, like you and I are aware of. But ultimately, the outputs now, 6 months on, are incredible. They have got a far more engaged workforce. People are far more willing to go the extra mile, and the communication, the transparency of communication up and down the line is like something that they've never experienced before. So there was resistance from leadership initially because they were like, I just want to be able to see on a report whether we're performing or not. But actually being able to encourage them to get that data from conversation has proved to be game-changing, completely game-changing. And people don't want to leave. People, that makes an organization sticky. People like being treated like that, and they like being engaged with in that way, which means they want to stay because they're not as likely to receive that treatment from someone in another organization that doesn't have the same approach or the same attitude. So this is a real opportunity for people to create a competitive edge, a kind of a differentiator for themselves that other people aren't able to replicate so easily, as opposed to all those other standard models that people roll out where you can just replicate it and implement it in your organization. You were nodding there. Were you nodding at me or were you nodding at go for it?
No, I was nodding at you in terms of the competitive advantage I believe as a recruiter you can have if you've got a really good culture and recruiting on culture and values. I do have a question if I can jump in as well.
Please go for it. Yeah.
We've spoken a lot about individual needs, but I think there are also business needs. And what I found in many companies I've worked for is that a lot of leaders will put in place very good culture, very good value principles, but all of a sudden when those business needs become pressing, the need for money, the need to sell, the culture sort of draws out and we become very process transactional driven again. And I was wondering if you had any tips for sort of in those tough times or those times when everyone feels up against it to get some results, how do we stay true to the culture? How do we keep implementing the values?
Fantastic question, because that often is when it breaks, right? It's like, oh yeah, but now we need to make some money. So often those values go out the window. The challenge is to trust that process and that it will work out. Sometimes you might have a short-term loss of revenue if you push through and you stick to the course of creating meaningful work. And we've seen that through various crises. Airlines, for example, through the pandemic. Some have not flourished, but some have not fired any of its people. And others have had huge layoffs. And the ones that stuck to their, we care about our people, we're not going to do that, we're going to stick together. I've seen people at the top take pay cuts to save people from losing their jobs. That is amazing. That often doesn't happen, because when that crisis comes, a lot of people revert to exactly what you're saying. Okay, well, let's push this through and let's do how we've always done it. And if you don't do how you've always done it and you trust that process, it takes courage, because it goes against what most people do in that situation. But there's really good case studies where that's worked in the long term. Yeah. And so that's what I want to highlight. Simon Sinek is really good at highlighting those kind of models of running a business that have actually worked. He's quite idealistic in many ways, but he also backs it up with some good data.
Thank you.
Great
I think that's the best answer I can give. It's a complex question. I think we could talk about it more. I would love to know others' opinions.
Very simple, straight line answer though. Thank you.
Just to build on that, and it's a tool that I know Ewan's familiar with. One of the tools that we use at Luminary Mindset is something called the consciousness table. And we try and encourage, it's different levels of emotion. To your point, Yannick, this is emotional. This is about connecting to emotion, but those higher states of emotion that we talk about, like the ones where we're more euphoric, they're more positive, regarded as positive emotions by society. And then what Ewan's just described is when the going gets tough, we tend to dip into fear, anxiety, stress, those lower levels of emotion, which can take people away from their purpose and their connection to that higher kind of mission or meaning that they created. So this consciousness table that we use is really, really useful. If anybody wants to look it up, it's called the consciousness table. And we roll it out across organizations to say, when you're having a conversation around strategy, around business objectives, around change, focus on what level of consciousness or what level of emotion or what experience you want to bring to that conversation or that decision to make sure it's the right decision for the short, medium and long term. Because people can go into short-termist viewing, which is the fear, the anxiety, the lower levels. And then once they're out of that crisis or out of that situation, they'll look back and go, oh, damn, we didn't stick to courage, we didn't stick to acceptance, we didn't stick to our bigger picture because we're human, we got frightened, we got scared, we got stressed. We're human, that's what happens.
And we know that these emotions, they drive people, but they not get them to do their best work.
Yeah.
So we can motivate people by instilling fear, and they're gonna get the job done. But if we want to have them to get the job done in the best way possible, especially if it's in a job where they have to innovate and create, we can't do that on negative emotions. We can do something, but it's not the kind of work that you would want from your people. So even in a crisis, even when the deadline is looming, some people, they thrive on doing that kind of work, and they have those kind of strengths, and they find it very meaningful to get really active in a crisis and take over and save. So find those people and activate them in those times. Absolutely. And the other people you need to innovate, they need to feel safe, so whatever you need to do to either create those emotions for them, maybe shield them from some of that stuff, maybe take some of the responsibility when the going gets tough away from them so that they continue to innovate.
Yeah.
That's how you play people to their strengths. Absolutely.
And this is for anyone on this webinar who's a leader of people, you might be thinking, oh my God, that sounds like such a huge responsibility. And it is. And it's why we encourage leaders to work on self-development, to work on their own resilience, to work on their own internal ways of being, understanding yourself, elevate your self-awareness, because in order to do what Yannick just described, to be able to identify the people that need to be stabilized and protected, to identify the innovators, the ones that can go out there and drive the business forward, you've got to be not in any state yourself. You've just got to be really with the situation and the bigger picture and nothing else, haven't you? You've got to have absolute clarity.
And I've worked with somebody who's been promoted, as you do, into a leadership position, but in their strength assessment, leadership came up at the bottom. Which doesn't mean it's a weakness, but it's just not very well developed. So he was able to do the leadership role relatively well, but it was exhausting. It was tiring. It cost a lot of energy. And there's a lot of people, I'm sure you have many in your organizations, who are really good, talented leaders, but they don't have it as a strength. They don't get energized by it. Yeah. They don't find it so meaningful, perhaps. It's a job that they do, and that makes it meaningful. And what they do with the money is meaningful. And maybe they enjoy some of the elements of leadership. But other people you put in a leadership position, and they just thrive. So that person that I've worked with actually decided to step out of the leadership position into a more technical role again, accepted a pay cut, and was a lot happier and a lot more productive.
Wow.
And somebody who was passionate about that leadership role could step in. Unfortunately, that didn't happen. Another leader stepped in who just did a job. So that wasn't the ideal scenario. But it goes to show those kind of challenges can be tackled in some unconventional ways. And it can really work out for the better, but it's not ideal always.
I really believe, and this isn't just because I'm in the profession, but I really believe that boards or executive teams could really benefit from having people like yourself sit as occasional, like once a quarterly consultants, just to look at, okay, this is what we're doing, this is how we're doing it. Are we aligned with what we said we were going to do last time, or can you see there are any inconsistencies or any kind of, because that bird's eye, that helicopter view that I experienced as audit and risk, director of audit and risk, you're just looking across everything on behalf of the organization, you're not part of it. And that helicopter view can really help leaders notice where they're maybe being inconsistent and not doing what you just described, or not bringing it to life through experience. Maybe they're saying it, but they're not doing it. Okay, so I want people to take away this next slide. So Yannick's going to talk us through this top-down, bottom-up. There are two models that Yannick introduced us to, and I just want Yannick to really introduce these as concepts that maybe you can take away. We're going to send you this pack afterwards, so if you prefer to listen rather than write down, but these are two models that Yannick's introduced us to that really bring to life what we've just been talking about.
Yeah, this is from my colleague Michael Steger, who's been researching meaning for a long time. And what he found from the research are these elements, these aspects we can use as a model to have conversations around meaning. And we mentioned bottom up, individual pathways, working with staff, working with workers, working with people in the ladder individually to help them create more meaning in their lives. We mentioned strength already. We mentioned making this personal, bringing yourself to work, figuring out what you as a person care about and how that resonates. Talking about resonates, looking at what the organization's values are, the ones that are embodied, the ones that are lived, and how perhaps I can align mine with theirs. There tends to be some overlap. If there's no overlap at all between what's personally meaningful to you and what's meaningful to your organization, that might be a conversation whether you want to be there or whether you're okay. It's always a choice. I believe people have a choice to just do a job and maybe not connect at that level. But chances are, once you have experienced connecting meaningfully at that level, you would probably want more of that. So some of the coaching conversations go in a different direction around, well, what other organization might connect with me more, or what other role might connect with me more. And then ideally there can be a shift within the organization, but sometimes people decide to leave the organization. I think that's a good thing for everybody involved. Integrate the motivation of your job with other elements of your life. So what happens in your work, and in what ways can you integrate that into what you're doing in the rest of your lives? So build more of a connection between your job and you as a person. If you connect that more, the more you connect that, the more it feels one, and not you're doing another thing as you get up and then you come home and you're yourself again. And then very importantly, connected to something that's bigger than you. How does your job play into something that's meaningful to you on a larger level? Not just, it could be as simple as, well, I get a salary and I help my kids to have the best life possible with that. That's already beyond yourself, but it can go beyond yourself in so many different ways. And looking at the stakeholders of that job, so many times I coach somebody and they don't see the end result of what their job is doing. They don't look at the people who benefit from this. They don't hear the feedback and the testimonials. They don't talk to the people who this product maybe helps or who this service elevates. So we can create some of that individually, and that helps. On the top-down area, I've sent you an earlier version. C just isn't for comma. We need a vision, creating that kind of why, creating what the organization's values are. That's going to really help. And if it's not a section on the website or words that you say, but it actually shows up, and this is what the authenticity is about, then you create something quite strong. Mike says organizations must follow their own mission, and leaders must behave ethically and honestly. Phony purpose and exploitation kill meaning. If somebody picks up that you're just playing a role, that these are just words that you say in order to have other people be more productive, then that's gonna kill it. It's gonna be counterproductive. So when you do this, you need to do it properly. You need to not just play the game, but you need to create this in a way that people buy it. that people believe you, that you're doing this and that you care about it. Respect, you need to, in order to create this, you need to model respect and create opportunities for these kind of interactions. So you need to respect the people that you're creating this for in order to get that respect back. And that can be difficult depending on what the relationships are like within your organization. It might take some time. It might not be a quick fix. Regaining somebody's respect and regaining somebody's trust after they feel, yeah, I'm not sure this person is really about this. It takes consistency, and it's consistently showing up and embodying these kind of values. Not just saying things are going to be different here, and then 2 weeks later you're like, oh, this is not working, they still don't trust me. It takes some time, and you might need to work on it depending on what your relationships are there. And making it clear what the links are, why this person's job is meaningful. Help them make the connection. You can't necessarily expect somebody who just started to be able to see how their job connects with how it helps certain stakeholders. You can, if you're in a leadership position, you can show that, share the testimonials, or send people occasionally to where the end result is. Help people to see, thank them, express gratitude because this led to this, led to this, led to this success for the organization. So that really helps. And if you allow people more autonomy to do their job in their way, and again, I appreciate the complexities of that, depending on how skilled and how autonomous that worker is. But if they have a good degree of autonomy, they tend to regard their work as more meaningful. And we have seen that if we grant people autonomy, a lot of things change. I'm generally a fan of trusting people. Once you give them the way, they can do a good job. But again, I appreciate the complexities that some people might just not be very good at their job. And if you give them autonomy, things just go very badly. So then again, if that person would play to their strengths, chances are they wouldn't be so bad at their job. So different factors have to come together. As any single one of them is probably not going to be your solution.
Yeah, great, thank you. One of the things, is there any questions? There's no hands up, no. One of the things that really resonated with me when you were just talking, Yannick, and it was as if I'd not heard that before. Of course I have from you, but it was fresh. That authenticity piece. Now, a lot of people that I work with don't realize they're being inauthentic. They're like, what do you mean I'm being inauthentic? And for me, one of the most common inauthenticities, and there's no judgment around this word, it's not like they're being wrong or there's anything wrong, it's just that there's a misalignment between what they're doing and saying and who they're being, is the intention that sits behind their actions. So often leaders will be pushing a message out, talking about meaning, talking about purpose, because they're stressed about a result or an outcome, because they're coming from that lower level of emotional energy. And that's what people feel. They feel the disconnect between the message and the intention. Whereas if we can coach and train ourselves and each other to message things because we genuinely believe it from a place of we want to connect, we want to empower, we believe in the vision, and we feel inspired and we feel delighted and excited by it, we can say exactly the same words in those two different states, but the words and the message will be heard completely differently. So for me, authentic leadership is about having a really genuine, authentic intention behind the message that isn't to do with self. It's very low self-interest. It's not about your needs, your bonus, your KPIs, your business objectives. It's about genuinely wanting to provide an excellent experience for the people that work for you, genuinely wanting them to create meaning in the work that they're doing and to feel connected, because you want them to have a nice life. And you want them to enjoy working for you, and you want them to create something that makes them happy rather than we've got to hit our targets. And your question is so relevant, because when the target question comes up at boards, and I've sat there and I've listened to them and I've heard them, and you can't just come out with what I've just said, well, we just want everyone to have a nice life. Yeah. So I'm not suggesting you do, but I have witnessed occasions where the CEO has said, similar to what Yannick replied to your question, Ewan, don't you worry, you trust us that we're going to get the right outcome, because we believe in the methods that we're implementing here, and we believe in the power of the people, and we believe we have the right people, and just give us, you ask for 6 weeks or a month or whatever to demonstrate that what we're saying is actually going to work. I've got some stuff going on in the chat. Thank you. Oh, people have to drop off, right? I was wondering what's going on. So yes, so we've only got 5 minutes left. So are there any questions? Has anybody got anything they want to add? I thought I mean, those two models there are really great takeaways to look at how you're showing up, I think, initially. So the thing I always say at the end of these webinars, Yannick, is to everybody, please try not to rush out and start sharing what you've heard today with people around you until you've really sorted it out internally within yourself. So self-reflection, yeah, would you agree?
Yeah, I've also just wanted to say about the measurement. I've just dropped a link in the chat. If these two models can really guide a conversation. These are the factors that you can build into this. If you want to measure meaning, there's ways. Academics have looked into this. Michael is the first one of those. Mike created a questionnaire, a set of questions, relatively short, about meaningful work. To what extent do you experience your life, your work as meaningful? So have a look at the WOMI on his website. It's there. It's freely available. And that's the work and meaning inventory. And if anybody wanted to assess meaning organization-wide without talking to every single person, they will give you some really good insights to start conversations.
Wonderful. Thank you. Okay, so without further ado, I would just like to say thank you, Yannick. Thank you so much. Thank you, Yannick. Thank you, Heather. Thank you, Jay. Because without this would not have been possible. And thank you to those of you who come and actually engage with us live, because there's nothing, it's so delightful to see people actually nodding and smiling and things resonating. You will get an email. All the participants of this webinar will get an email, and you'll have a link as usual if you want 30 minutes with myself, a small donation to the charity that we support at here at Luminary Mindset. So Bright Futures of Bardia, an amazing charity set up by a lady called Jackie Holt. She's building a school and running an education and health sort of system over in Nepal. So Bardia is a small town in the southwest of Nepal. They've had a terrible time these last 18 months, as if life wasn't hard enough. Jackie started building the school a couple of years ago, and they've continued that project throughout COVID. So any donation to this charity would be hugely appreciated. If you want 30 minutes with me as a follow-up from this meeting, please follow the link in the email that you'll get. And our next webinar that we're running is relevant to what we've talked about today. So creating energy and time in your life. Now, who doesn't want more energy and time? So understanding your lifestyle choices. This is something a little bit different from what we've done before. But this is a webinar where we're going to talk about the system of your body, mind and emotions, and how it all relates to leadership, and how it actually relates to a lot of what we said we were talking about today, where Yannick was talking about those emotions that are needed to help drive performance in ourselves and others. So if you're interested, you'll all get an email as you did to attend this one. But if you're interested, please register via the link that I think will be sent in the email out to you after this one. And hopefully we'll see you on the next session, unless there are any questions. Can we unmute everybody?
I gotta run. So I've got a hard stop.
All right. Thanks, Yannick. Thanks, everybody.
Thank you so much. Thanks, everybody.
Take care. Have a great day. Thanks, everyone.
Dankeschön.
Bitteschön.
Oh, bitteschön.
Thank you. Thanks very much, Zoe.
Thank you,
Thanks,
everybody. Thank you.
Thank you, Zoe.
Have a great day. Thanks for coming.